Pear Deck, what it was. If you are not familiar with it, I would be more than happy. If you send me an email, I'll put my email up at the end. I would be more than happy to like Zoom with you or email about Pear Deck. Pear Deck is just an add-on for Google Slides. So when you're in Google Slides, we're a Google school, so I don't know how it would work with PowerPoint, but when you click on add-ons, I have a lot that I use, but Pear Deck is just an add-on that actually just opens a bar over on the side. And you can actually add questions right into your Google Slides. I really like it because everything is right here. So you can add different questions, and I'll talk more about Pear Deck once I kind of get there. But the slides, I actually just created a short link for my slides. And so it's actually just bit.ly/Chem COVID. That was just kind of the easiest thing to have, but I have a lot of hyperlinks in here that you're more than happy to use. So kind of just really quick, I'm Sam. Hopefully now my introduction will work a little better. I teach AP Chemistry at Penn Trafford High School, so I am actually on the western side of the state. I teach just in an eastern suburb of Pittsburgh. I've actually been teaching hybrid, so we've been in person with the occasional few days off due to positive cases since the beginning of school. So we have two groups, green and gold, and we just go, I'm at school every day. So every day I have kids in my classroom, but I also have kids remote. So I have kids in the classroom and remote. I just kind of put specialties, things that kind of I'm known for at school is using Google in the classroom. I'm a Google trainer, so I do a lot of professional development with the staff at my school. I use Edpuzzle. I've used Edpuzzle for 5 years now. I've flipped my classroom, and I've started using Pear Deck a lot more this year. And like Michelle said, I am now the president of PSTA, so the Pennsylvania Science Teachers Association. So kind of a little nerve-wracking type of year, but I'm excited. So I'm actually in my 9th year teaching. It's 7th year in Pennsylvania. I actually grew up in Indiana State. I went to Purdue, so now happy to be in Pennsylvania. So kind of how I've adapted to hybrid teaching, it definitely was new, difficult, but I just kind of had to go in with a different mindset, specifically with labs. I'll talk a little about how I've done virtual lab partners, but also how I've created lab videos, and I'm going to share those with everybody. You can feel free to use them. And then how I engage students. So I'll talk a little about Edpuzzle, Pear Deck, and something that I've done more this year is made my things that are usually paper-based digital, but more specifically with card sorts and using interactive slides, and then just some new ways of assessing. So I know that there was a question that was, how do we assess? How do I make sure that I'm assessing my students and they're not cheating? That was a big thing. And so I'll talk a little bit about how I've assessed as well. So you can see down on the slides, right? I was supposed to have these little Pear Deck questions, but I didn't have you guys join Pear Deck, so you can just see my slides. Let's see if I can do this just to make it a little bigger. So labs are a little different when we have to socially distance. So when I have to keep my students apart, it's a little bit different. So I started with virtual lab partners. So at the beginning of the year, to put it in perspective, I had more students in the classroom. I now have dropped, for example, my first period class started with 22 in person. I now have 8, and I'm lucky to have 8. That's split over 2 days as well. So 4 and 4. So I started doing virtual lab partners. And so what I did is I'd have one student from group 1, one student from group 2. And so they would virtually communicate during lab. And this worked better with 2-day labs. Some of them would have a third group member. It was a completely remote student. And during lab, you can see my principal actually took these pictures from one of the labs we did at the beginning of the year. So students were still, across from each other. They had goggles on, gloves on, but then a lot of them chose to use their phones to FaceTime or Google Meet their lab partners. And so one of the students, day 1, they were collecting recording data. sharing what was happening with their lab partner. They'd be holding it up to their phone, asking them if they can see what's happening, and then it would switch on the next day. So then the next group would actually finish the lab. And so what I really liked about these virtual lab partners is that it required students to really develop their communication skills. They needed to describe exactly what was happening to their lab partner that was sitting at home. So I really liked how it made the students communicate more. It wasn't just do it, write it down. They actually had to talk to their lab partners. Now, there were times when timing didn't work. So for example, I had my entire specific heat of a metal lab set up to review calorimetry. And that day we found out that we were going to be off for the next 3 days due to positive cases. So instead of us doing it in person, what I actually did is I just recorded the procedure. So I have just it was $7 tripod from Amazon, and I used my phone and I just had it over my shoulder and I did the lab. So the specific heat of a metal lab, you can actually see if you click on it. So if you open the slides, there's the YouTube video of my specific heat of a metal lab. If there are any of these that you like and you're wondering what my handout looks like, I'm more than happy to share those. You just have to send me an email. I'll send you them back. But if it's a video, the students just watch the procedure. And I know it's not ideal, but it's either via video like this was or as a demo. So I didn't feel comfortable with students doing flame tests in cloth masks. And so I did it as a demo for them. I felt a lot better about me. I knew how far away I needed to be. And so I actually just did the flame tests as a demo, but then also recorded it for students who for some reason weren't able to tune in synchronous that day. So the students still collect data. They're still analyzing the data. They're still turning in lab reports. So they keep a lab notebook, a carbon copy lab notebook, and they still turn them into me, but it's just a virtual format instead. And if you don't want to use a lab, I would recommend a simulation. So PhET, I use a lot. And there are some just like college websites that have simulations. I'm doing one for Le Chatelier's principal tomorrow, actually. So that's just another option. And when it comes to lab videos, so again, each of these are hyperlinks. I always have the question, well, how do I start? Just record. Whether it's, you're on your computer and you want to just hold up what you're doing, show your students, you want to just use your phone, or you want to have a student record you while you're doing a demonstration. Right? Any of those work, but just jump in and record. You don't have to make it public. You can make it unlisted for your students to see, but just hit the record button on Zoom or on Google Meet or on your phone. Does it take time? Yes. So when you look at some of my videos, did they take me time to create and to edit? Yes. However, I now have them forever. So once we get back to in-person 5 days a week doing labs, if I have a student that's gone, I can just send them the lab video and tell them, all right, I need you to collect data, and then we'll analyze like everyone else. So that's kind of labs, how labs look in my classroom. Again, I'm in the high school setting, so it's a little bit different. We're not able as much to have them do it at home. And so I have to create more of this virtual setting. So then another question is, when students are learning remotely, how are they engaging with the content? So again, you can see I put a little pair down here. So I like putting a little pair on a slide when I know that I'm going to ask students a question. So usually if you see a little pair, if I opened Pear Deck, so since I'm just in Google Slides, Pear Deck is not actually running. I have to open it in my add-ons and actually hit Start Lesson in Pear Deck for it to actually ask you the questions. And it looks just like this, except as student view, you also have a question pane over on the right-hand side. And so in this case, how are you having students engage with the material? And I know that Michelle asked that question already, but what it would look like if you were on the student end and I had this running as Pear Deck is you'd have a little write your response over on the right-hand side, and you could just type in your response. So I've used Pear Deck a lot of different ways, and I'll talk about that in just a couple slides. But one of the ways that I have students engage with content before we talk about it in class is through Edpuzzle. So like I said, I've used Edpuzzle for quite a few years. If you're having students watch any kind of videos that you make, videos that someone else makes, any kind of content videos, You can have them engage with the video by adding questions, comments, voice notes. Edpuzzle has started to become pretty common, especially with remote learning. But my students like Edpuzzle. The only thing they don't like about it is they can't speed me up. They can't speed up my talking because Edpuzzle, I've requested it numerous times, but it affects where your questions are in the video. And so you can't speed it up. Other than that, they love that it requires them to stop and think. And so I actually put a little picture here. This is one of my equilibrium videos. So there's my video, and then I'm asking them a multiple choice question. So the nice thing about Edpuzzle is you can use your own videos. You can add a video from YouTube, or Edpuzzle has a community full of videos that other teachers have made that you can also use. One thing with Edpuzzle, if you do use Edpuzzle, I like to add a short answer question at the end of the video. And I like to ask my students, what questions do you still have about this video? So by adding that at the very, very end of the video, one, students know that they're done. But then two, it allows me in the morning before class starts to really see if there's a lot of questions. For example, today, my students, the one question that they had was, I understand what Le Chatelier's principle means, but when we say shift, right, or the reaction proceeds in a direction, can you talk a little bit more about that? So that's how we started class today. We started going a little bit more into the vocabulary and forward and reverse reaction. If someone says it shifts left or shifts right. So I like adding that short answer question at the very end, just as a way to start class the next day. So Pear Deck. So this is what a lot of people said that they used, similar to Nearpod. I don't use Nearpod as often. I use Pear Deck. And my students really liked Pear Deck when we were completely remote. So when we were completely online, I was utilizing Pear Deck a lot as a way to go through new material, but also as a way to review material. So essentially, instead of having students sit passively, so kind of like you guys are right now, you can use Pear Deck to have them engage with the material. So if I started Pear Deck, every time there's a little pair, I've added a question. Now this pair is not usually there. You can actually see at the very bottom of my slide, there's a kind of a dark gray bar. That means that a question has been added to Pear Deck. I like adding the pair with the actual question, so that way students know what they're answering. So it's just an add-on. Everything is done right from slides. You can add questions directly into slides because you have the pane over on the side. The question types, you can have text, so type your answer. You can have multiple choice. You can have a number. So an example of a number question that I did when we were doing kinetics was I gave them a rate law and I asked them to tell me the order of each reactant and then also the overall order. So I put different numbers. I put zeros, ones, and twos, and then they had to drag the numbers. You can also have them look at a website. So kind of like with Nearpod, it had to pull up PhET right into Nearpod. It actually can have them access a website. So you actually have the slides on the left of the screen and then a website that they can browse on the right. And there's also drawing and dragging, but those are for premium. But I would recommend, if you think you might use Pear Deck, there's a 30-day free trial for premium. And so you can try premium, see if you like it. Otherwise, I want to say it's $100 for the year, but some schools are covering it as well. But you can also try premium. So Pear Deck is something that my students really enjoy. I'd be more than happy. Most of my Pear Decks came from my kinetics unit. So I'd be more than happy if you're reviewing kinetics, you haven't gotten there yet. I'd be more than happy to share any of those Pear Decks. Again, it's just Google Slides. So it's just Google Slides that I've added additional questions to. So something else that I started doing this year, and I actually wrote a blog post on ChemEdX, and so I put the link at the bottom of the slide as well. But I tried to turn my card sorts digital. So card sorts are a great way to have students apply their knowledge. It's physical sorting, so they can actually, sort things in front of them. I like using them as basic as matching the electron configuration to the element, all the way up to, you can see on this, I did VSEPR, intermolecular forces, and polarity. So obviously I can't have students sharing the pieces of paper, and it would just take me way too much time to cut out card sorts for every single student. And so what I actually did is I created card sorts in Google Slides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what my card sort looks like. And if you want your own copy, even just to look at, on this slide, if you actually click this link, it forces you to make a copy. And so you can actually have a copy of your own. I've also done card sorts for photoelectron spectroscopy as well, because that was new in the AP curriculum recently. So I went through and I just added, some review, some directions. Even though I teach juniors and seniors, they still need directions. But essentially what I did is I made the background so like I can't do anything to this. So the background of my slide are the different categories. And then I just found Lewis structures that I wanted to use. And I just pasted them right into the slides. And so what students can do, I actually share this through Google Classroom, and it can create a copy for each student. And so then what they can do is they can just drag and drop into their respective category, and then they can move on to the next slide. So I actually use the same substances for the entire thing. So they went from the shape. So we went back to review shapes. Then they looked at polarity, and then they tied it into intermolecular forces. So although no, they're not actually doing it on their desks, they're still sorting and manipulating digitally. And then what I did is I actually added some extra short answer or free response questions to the end. So again, they can sort here. And then if you look, this is the background. So students can't change this. All they can do is click in here to type their response. And then they can actually type in their response to answer the question. And I did it for some free response questions as well. So card sorts are something I've been trying to make more and more card sorts. I actually have this how to create a digital card sort tutorial video that I created. So that's up on YouTube as well. So those are all links you're free to use, change, manipulate, however you need to use them. If you don't want to use them, that's okay. And then interactive Google Slides. So I actually got this idea from another AP chemistry teacher on Twitter. And she was talking about how she can have all of her students working at the same time. And I thought that's a great idea when I want students to do what would usually be just a worksheet, right? It's usually just a quick review worksheet, quick check for understanding. But when I have students in the classroom and at home, it's hard to check. It's hard to look at all of them and see, are they really getting it, or are they just saying that they do it? And so I started creating these interactive Google Slides. So with this interactive Google Slides, what it is every student in my first period class is working in the same slide deck, whether they're working in small groups or individually. So if they're working in small groups, I put them into breakout rooms, and I can view the work all at once. And so what I did for this example that's on here, and I'll show you the other tab, is I actually just created this from what's usually just a worksheet, right? A paper-based activity. And so here's my identifying. You can see this is all intermolecular forces. I was really trying to make this digital because it's so conceptual. So what I did is, this is just my template. So you're free to make a copy of this. I just gave each group, they were working in small groups, an assigned slide. So I had 4 breakout rooms, 4 in-class groups. I gave them directions, so they knew exactly what they needed to do. And then they had a slide. What I did is I made one of these slides and I just duplicated it. So I just right-clicked, duplicate slide, and then I did it for all the slides that I needed. So all I did is I just took, again, this is the background. I made this the background in Google Drawings, and I just put it into the background of the slide, adjusted it a little bit as needed, and then I put in these shapes. So it gave them what they were trying to do in the directions, and they could actually just drag the shapes to their respective substance. And so I had enough shapes for them to circle. And then what I like to do, because what I did is I put it into the grid view. So I could see each group working. I could see each group moving all of the shapes. And then I could also tell when they had a question, because I told them if they had a question to start typing in red. And then if they started, or typing in a different color. And if I noticed they were typing in a different color, or they could jump back into the main room in Google Meet and they could ask me the question. But then once they were done, I actually had them move the star over onto the slide, because when you're in grid view, I noticed the star was on the slide. That told me that the students thought they were done. I could go to that slide, I could check answers. And then what I actually did, and I got permission to use these slides, so my students, they knew I was going to use these. I actually moved the star out of the way and I just put a smiley face. I just went into the shapes and I put in a smiley face. So then what I could see when I was in this view, and some of my students liked, playing around with the colors, but then they had a smiley face and then I knew that I had checked their slide. So then when I only had one group left, I could focus specifically on their slide. So I really liked doing this. My students said they really liked it because they were working in small groups, but they were getting immediate feedback from me as they were working, even though they maybe were sitting at home. So it's something that I've started to do a lot more. Students really like it. And one thing with engagement is I'm constantly asking students for feedback. I tell them, even if it's not good, I still want to know. I want to know what's good, what's not good, how can we make it better? And so these are things that students have said that they liked. And then finally, how can we assess students if they're at home? So this gets tough, right? Adapting assessments for if they're at home, because one of the questions I always hear is, well, how do you prevent students from cheating? And the answer is, it's unless you're sitting there with them, it's really hard to know that they're not actually using their notes. You can have a camera on, but do I know that their notes aren't plastered on the wall behind them? No. So some things that I found is I tell students, okay, use your notes. You can use your notes on the quiz. And sometimes I let them use notes on the lower stakes tests, right? The lower stakes formative or summative assessments like quizzes, but I time it. So then students realize if they're using their notes, they're going to run out of time. So then when it comes time for our big tests, which are built like an AP test, multiple choice free response, then they know if they rely on their notes, they're going to run out of time. So they kind of learn their lesson once and then they're like, okay, I really need to know this. So you can allow students to use your notes, but give them a time limit. So then another question is, well, how do I time them? So if you use multiple choice assessments, I used to use Google Forms, but feedback from my students is that they hated scrolling. They hated scrolling through all of the questions on Google Slides. And so if you've heard of ZipGrade, I've used ZipGrade for quite a few years. It's essentially a digital Scantron machine using your phone. If you haven't used ZipGrade, I highly recommend checking it out. It's $7 a year and you get as many scans as you want. So basically students take a quiz on a bubble sheet. I hold my phone above it in the app, it grades it, it tells me what their score is. But ZipGrade has now released remote testing. This is actually how I've used tests and quizzes for the last month or so now. A lot of teachers at our school have started to use this. So essentially you have a pane on the left that looks like a bubble sheet, and then the pane on the right is the actual test, and they can scroll through and click. So they just said it's easier for them to see the questions and see the answer choices and not kind of get bogged down with everything else. So ZipGrade, I highly recommend if you keep doing multiple choice. But if you want to kind of think outside of the box, have students explain their learning. I love Flipgrid. This link to Flipgrid is actually an example. It was kind of a trial run that I did last year with two of my students who are now lab assistants. They're now seniors. And Zach and Andrew, I asked for their permission as well. And they were like, yeah, feel free, share away with all the teachers that you want. So I had them answer a free response question via video. And you can click on that link, you can watch their videos. But what I really like about it is that it's short videos, and then I can give immediate feedback via video as well. And you can actually watch some of the feedback that I gave. One of them forgot units on rate constant. So I responded and I said, great job, but I don't think I heard your units. And then he went back and he told me, well, because it's first order, here's what the rate constant units would be. So having students explain their learning, they said that was tough. They could answer the free response question all day, but actually explaining it was hard. So thinking outside the box, do I still have to give multiple choice tests? Yeah, I still need to prepare my kids for the AP test, but I can do these small Flipgrid assignments in between to make sure that they can explain their learning. I can have them create a video or a podcast or something like that where they're explaining their learning. So Flipgrid is something that I really like to do that's kind of outside of the box. So resources, I tried to put some of my resources on one slide. Again, if you want access to the slides, it's bit.ly/chemcovid. But all of these are hot links. So the AP Chemistry Labs is actually my YouTube playlist. So you can feel free, if you see any in there that work for you, you want to use them, you want to share them with other people, feel free. I haven't made any in a little bit because we've been doing more simulations than anything. But then the technology tools, I've been hyperlinking those in here, and then how to create a digital card sort and how to create an editable PDF in slides. Those are two of my tutorial videos that I made as well. So these will all be shared. I'll make sure that this gets to Michelle as well, so it gets emailed out to everyone. But then just kind of the last slide, thank you. You can see my email, my Twitter. So if you want to send me an email, it's ramaswamy@penntrafford.org. I have my Gmail as well. That was on the first slide. So whether you want to use my school account or my Gmail, either one works. I check both. But feel free. You can also reach out on Twitter. And I think just kind of one last thing that we were kind of hoping for before you left was just, what was a key takeaway from tonight's session? What was one thing that you're like, I want to try that, I want to look at that, this sounds really interesting. So in the chat, if you could just type in one key takeaway from just in general, tonight's session in general, we would love to see what you guys are talking about in the chat. And I will stop sharing my screen. I will make sure to put a link to my slides in the chat right now. And I know, like I said, Michelle will get those sent out as well. But just in case, I'll put them in here for you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. I always learn so much from you. Sam is a Google trainer, and you have 2 other badges, right? What else do you train?
I have Google trainer, and then I'm technically an Edpuzzle. It's an Edpuzzle something. I don't know what the official name
Ambassador.
is. Yeah, and then I've actually done a lot with the Flipped Learning Initiative. I was an ambassador for them as well.
Well, yeah. I'd like to open it up to you. Does anyone have something that they would like to share? I know some of you, I asked, would you like to share it at our meeting? And some of you did say that you would. Does anyone want to share something that really works for them? Okay, if you don't want to share, let me just share one more thing. This is the link that you'll get, and I have 15 labs in it that you can modify, or just some of my ideas. So let me just quick share my screen again. And then you're welcome to leave now if you can't stay. Let me just see something. There we go. Okay, so the link that I had on my slide is really a PowerPoint that we all have access to. And so someone asked about the songs. I have the songs in here, but these are all the labs that I do. I do a Koch analysis lab, a density lab, specific heat capacity, heat of fusion of ice. I do a nomenclature lab, solubility lab. I put all of the labs and how to adapt them into this. So you can put your information in. This will always be open indefinitely. Types of chemical reactions, percent composition, how we do these at home. I do this lab called Alien Periodic Table. Also, molar volume of a gas. You know what works really well for that? I used a butane lighter, and we determined the molar volume of butane through the water displacement. I just had them hold it underwater and use a graduated cylinder to measure the amount of gas. So I have lots of spaces for labs. You can always add one. I have to put some videos in here, but you're welcome to put videos in there. And then I have this link for the song. So let me just put one more link in there. So I will send that out. Let me share. Let me just put this in the chat right now. Copy link. So I'll put this in the chat. Let me just stop sharing. And then in the chat, so everyone. So all of the adaptations, I even have a flame test lab in there, and how you can get like what ordinary substances have strontium in them, and calcium chloride are in those some of your purses, a desiccant used. So there are ways to get the chemicals, even if they're not in lab. But it also depends on the developmental level of your students. I mean, of course, flame testing, you could do that with a candle, really. But for my school, if they have to have adult supervision, so it goes back to them. And I love the way Sam does it. It's easy to do. Go into your lab and do a flame test and videotape it and have them do it, and you could do an unknown. So that works real well. So, how about any questions? We're excited that you guys stayed the whole time. I'm sorry, I know I ramble sometimes, but we have so much to offer. And Sam has always been there. If you need any ideas, she's really super creative. So please don't hesitate to contact either of us. I just look forward to working with Sam and growing with her, and any ideas that you all have, I'm excited to learn more. So please, let's stay in constant communication with each other. You can always add something to the Google document. I really appreciate you guys all attending. It's really been exciting for me to see human beings. I feel terrible all locked up. Do you have any questions for us?
Just wanted to say that it was wonderful. I really appreciate all the things that you put into this, and it's sparked some new ideas for me. Some of the things I know that Sam showed us are things that I've been working on, like in Jamboard. I did a name game lab where they had to slide things on, and they really enjoyed it. And it takes a long time to create those things, and you just don't know. The first time I did it, it was awful. My kids were like, so I had to revamp it. And I told them, you guys are game editors. I have to try it out. And you're my guinea pigs. And thanks for sitting there for 2 hours with your brain going nuts. But, you're getting credit for it. But
I know.
it turned out that I ended up with a pretty good thing finally, after several groups had used it. So that's just kind of how it is. Everything's new and everything's creative. And like you, Michelle, I've been doing the flipped classroom too. So for several years, I've been having kids be more scientific and build their own ideas and find out the density of pennies somewhere else besides from me. I'm not going to tell you. You have to find it. You have this magic machine in your hands. Go figure it out. Right. I don't even give them links anymore. I'm like, you can.
Well, that's what's great about not being so accessible.
Right.
Then
you need to be accessible for the hard stuff. The really hard stuff you need to be there for. So.
That's right. But I hear you so much. I mean, I feel overwhelmed at times because now through these different programs, you get a response from all your students, where when you're in class, I'm getting overwhelmed by data myself. But when you're in class, it's you ask a question, and then 2 or 3 people answer, then you move on to someone else, and now it really makes them accountable as well. So thank you for sharing that. And Sam, oh my gosh, the number of hours, Ellen, it sounds like you put a lot of hours into it as well, developing the games and stuff. In a way, it's almost like our first year of teaching, even though I've been teaching 35 years, right? Because you're designing all this stuff in a virtual world. but it's really time consuming now, but 5 years from now you have it, but if we go back in person, then so anything else?
I think it's
Angela?
I think it's really great that we are learning all these new things, especially those of us who have been around for decades and decades. I do feel like a digital immigrant sometimes, but
Yeah.
I think we've learned a lot of new ways to do things that we never would have considered if we didn't have to come up with something new. And so that's going to give us a whole portfolio of new things to use, even when we are back in person. It's just a fun way or a different way to do it.
Yeah. So for example, the fact that I have them analyze the whole class data, I didn't do that before. They analyze their data. Now they're looking at everyone's, and it's fostering critical thinking more. So there's some really great upsides to all of this. Anything else anyone would like to add? Liz?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any organic chemistry resources?
Organic chemistry? I do have a lot of organic chemistry. I can put the links into, because in general chem and principles of chem, like we devote 2 or 3 chapters to it. Gen chem 2 chapters, principle of chem, or just the opposite, 3 chapters. So I do organic in general chem, but I do have a colleague that is an organic teacher, a faculty member, so I can ask him as well for you. Are you talking about college organic chemistry, or are you talking about general chemistry, the organic component to it?
No, I teach a high school chemistry course.
Okay.
So the students have already taken chemistry 1, and then we offer an organic chemistry course. And it's really an introduction to introduce them to the basics of organic chemistry. And I focus a lot on mechanism because I think that's really important. So it's that sort of thing. But I'm struggling so hard to find online resources and just to put together. And I'm also writing a general regular chemistry course, rewriting that for the online. And I'm just somewhat overwhelmed as all of you are, but I feel so inspired having heard all the stuff you've been talking about. So thank you so much, because it was beginning to weigh really heavily, and now I'm feeling, much more enthusiastic about spending a day.
Well, Liz, I will tell you, when I was asked to design the all virtual lab course, it probably took me 80 hours. So make sure you get compensated. No, I mean, it really took so much time, because I'm not a perfectionist, as you could tell from my videos, but I get lost in finding things, and trying them out, and it really has to go with your personality or whatever. Sam, do you have organic resources that you think might be beneficial too?
I don't yet. I was actually just asked a couple of weeks ago to teach an organic course next year for high school. So I next year might have them. I've been actually starting to look and compiling resources as well. But Liz, what I would say, even if you're just focusing on getting kids engaged, and the first thing you start with is a PowerPoint and you put it into Google Slides, you can use Nearpod or Pear Deck just as a way to engage the kids, as much as which of these 2 mechanisms, right, is SN1, even something like that, just a kind of a check for understanding during the slides. Because my kids said even with just those couple questions, it made them pay attention, because they said at home, I don't always pay attention. You're up in the front of the room, but then when we're all online and I'm doing Pear Decks that way, they said they're then you start saying our names with oh, Liz, great answer. And they're then we realize we have to pay attention.
Right.
So I would say, even if you just start with something like that, if you're looking at just engagement, but unfortunately I don't have any. I'm looking at textbooks right now. So that's all.
Well, Liz,
as far as I've gotten.
I will do some sleuthing, but rest assured you have support people. Sam and I are happy to help. Like if you need ideas, I mean, we're happy to research some stuff for you as well. And I'll keep my eyes peeled whenever I see something that you really might be able to use. I'll put it in that document or shoot you a quick email.
Oh, that'd
And
be wonderful.
Liz,
Thank you so much.
where are you teaching at?
I teach at Garnet Valley High School, which is
Okay.
southeast Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh. I love your accent.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not only am I a digital immigrant, I'm also an immigrant, but yeah. So I've spent a lot of time growing up in England.
That's
before we-
wonderful. I was just there before, right before COVID.
Okay.
I was at Oxford, so yeah,
Okay.
it was a lot of fun actually. So, but thank you all so much for participating. And you have the Google Doc, but I'll send it out as well. I have everyone's email, and by all means, anytime you have a question, Sam and I, if we know something, that'll help, we're happy to do it. If we don't know, we'll try to find someone who does know or has a great idea. So thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate your
You're
help.
welcome.
Thanks
glad
for
that
attending,
I don't-
Alan.
The
Thanks,
echo got
Liz.
figured out.
What was that?
So I'm glad the echo got figured out. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on with it, but I wasn't getting an echo. So
Yeah, but then other people would start talking and it would echo too. So I was like, oh, well. I'm like, well, we got to
Yeah,
figure it out.
but
though. It
I
was-
did
I don't know if
notice
it
that-
was.
yeah.
Oh,
So
I was just gonna say I don't know if it was like just when the screen was shared or something. I don't know.
huh. I don't know either. And then is that Victoria out there?
Yeah, hey, it's me.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for coming.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So we had 37 people sign up. This is Victoria. Victoria, this is Sam. And
Oh, Michelle, you probably want to stop the recording.
Oh yeah, I do. Thanks. I forgot.
Just it'll be less to trim off at the end.
Yeah. Let me see.